where I thought we'd start off, and I want you to get ready for your questions, and because we're going to ask you, I mean, it's what you want to know, what you want to pose to these folks and find out. But where I thought we'd start is after hearing what we've heard so far, and especially from you, Dr. Pugh, is if we think about a stalker operation, obviously there's differences, but I'm going to ask you, in your mind, what should an effective parasite control program be? In other words, what should the goal of that be? Should it be to get rid of everything? Should it be total economics based, and how do I do that, et cetera?
One of the bigger things that I look at when I start targeting parasites is it's a target. That if I'm dealing with external parasites, I'm going to focus on external parasites if that's what I need to control. My internal parasite control, again, is very focused, that I'm targeting the parasites that I'm trying to take care of. I'm not afraid to use multimodal effects on it, because we do know the draw and the overall economic benefits of the use of these products, but I want to use them in a responsible way that's targeted on either the specific one that I'm after, or either external or internal. So that's kind of where I start.
So, with our practice, we deal with, it's not just stalkers, we're cow-calf, and so there's a lot of different things that we take into account. The time of year, like he said, there's certain times where we're much more concerned with ectoparasites, flies and lice, than we are internals, and so that's going to kind of change how we view things. If we're receiving cattle later in the winter versus early in the fall, where those cattle came from, were they backgrounded previously before? Did they come from a ranch down the road? And we know they utilize a pretty good processing protocol in advance, even though most of the time we don't know that. I would say 99% of the situations I'm involved in, we don't know what they've had previously. Most of them are high risk and coming from the southeast, at least the places I'm dealing with. And from what some of the research does say, most people are utilizing dual deworming programs. They're using a white wormer as long as a topical macrocytic lactone, because the research says that cleans them out better than anything. And whether that's right or wrong, that's what most of us are doing. To be utilizing fecals on a intense stalker program, I guess I just haven't seen where we've done it effectively to help make decisions. So, all in all, it's what kind of cattle we're looking at, where they came from, what time of year it is. I wouldn't say we use risk to assess that, at least not in the stalker part of it.
Well, what they said, I agree with. They're real veterinarians, and I hadn't been a real veterinarian for 35 years. I'm not even one anymore. I beat iron now, and I read research and crap like that. But you can't develop a program, a herd health program, until you know what you're fighting. And you don't know what you're fighting until you know what worms you got. So you can't just say, let's throw crap at it. You have to determine if you have a need to deworm, what kind of parasites are there. I'd get with them and a diagnostic laboratory. I'd like an independent group to tell me what it is. With great respect to drug companies, I don't want them telling me what I need to give. You with me on that? Yep. I need to know what I've really got to fight. And once I have determined what my need is on a group of cattle and what parasites that I have, then I'm going to kill them. I'm going to develop a program that will kill them. But killing them ain't just about a dewormer. Whether you pour it on, you inject it, you put it down the throat. Killing them is multifactorial. It's pasture management. It's diet. Oh, my Lord. Protein intake and energy intake got a whole lot more to do about killing parasites than other things. And then and trace minerals. Then you make it better. You make it better by adding a dewormer that is easy to give, that's very effective if you can get those two things together, that will kill the parasites you got. You with me?
Yep.
All right.
So and again, it depends on the timing, but say we brought in some high-risk calves we're going to straighten out and do something with. As a routine course, would you use a dewormer, or do you do some kind of diagnostics to determine if you need to use one? How do you approach it?
Yeah, every program I deal with, if it's high-risk cattle, pretty much anywhere, which most of them are from the southeast, they're getting dual dewormed. Pretty much every program. So they're going to get a white worm or orally, and they're going to get a topical macrocytic lactone. In the probably later on in the year, a lot of guys will go, so, first part of the spring, last part of the winter, we have some yards that will do an oral white wormer only, and then we'll switch to more of a ectoparasite treatment to cover lice, potentially flies, but mostly it's the lice issue at that time of year.
One thing I wanted to bring up about these high-risk cattle, these high-risk knocker cattle, the vast majority are coming in with a pretty good load of internal parasites. And that's the world we live in. But when I'm bringing in a group of animals and I'm putting them into a dry lot, if I'm bringing it into my backgrounding facility or feedlot, there is no more, they don't pick up any other worms. Okay, so what they have coming in is what they're stuck with, that's stuck inside their intestinal tract. Because of that, I know that it's going to hinder immune function, because the immune system will try to fight those parasites instead of responding to the vaccines that I'm trying to give to it and battling against respiratory disease. I know it's robbing some of those calves of protein digestion and energy, everything. I want to increase my efficiency, and they're coming into a dry lot. I'm not as concerned about the product usage for resistance, because they're not going anywhere. I do want to clean them out, because that's where I'm seeing my added benefit economically, especially when they come into a dry lot and they're not going back out to graze. So,
Dry lots of any sort will break a parasite cycle by themselves. And if you use dewormers like Ty was talking about, that were both a white wormer orally and a macrocytic lactone pour on or injectable wise, we still have the potential right now to use Cydectin by itself to be just as efficacious based on good research. How long that will last, I don't know, but it will work right now. But a white wormer and a macrocytic lactone, where you pour it on or inject it, and a dry lot, you're going to clean out their gullet pretty good, and you would, if you're going to stay there or go into a revolving type pasture, not a static pasture, but a pasture that was a wheat pasture last year or hay pasture, and then this year's going to be a chasm. Those type of pastures, then you will not have a buildup of dewormers, of resistant parasites. So you kind of pick what you want. I'm a big Valbasin, Panicure, a Synatic fan. So that's all. You put anthracite in there, that's all of them. And I'm a big Cydectin fan for those, either by itself or with those. But any other macrocytic lactone will work as good as Cydectin if you use a white wormer with it.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Before we get too far beyond, what are you wanting to hear about? What are you wanting to know?
This may not be as applicable for the stocker operators, but say in a cow-calf setting, and I don't care who fields it, but how real is the benefit of co-species, meaning running like cows and goats together? One of the touted benefits is that goats will offset some of the problems with the cattle and vice versa. Can you guys speak to that?
Grazing sheep after cattle or before cattle. Man, that's a mamma jamma yellow hammer way to control parasites, because sheep and cows don't get the same parasites. They get one alike. They share one called T. axii, and he don't cause no trouble. He stands on the side of the road and yells at you, and one day you stop because you're pissed off, and he'll run off. He ain't nothing. So the ones that sheep have, they share them with goats, but they don't share them with horses and cows. So if a cow, particularly mama cows, oh man, mama cows are great to vacuum the pasture. They suck up the worms. And if they've got good immunity, which they usually do to homunculus or cupera in calves, they don't get those. And they suck up the sheep parasites. And they get inside the sheep, and I say with great respect, they say, what the crap? This ain't Kansas no more. They're not going to survive. You with me on this? Because sheep have their own parasites. So mama cows are a way that everybody in the world uses to decrease parasitism in sheep. But we don't think about it here in the United States because we rich. We rich on dewormers, and we use round bales. Hey, the rest of the world ain't got dewormers and stuff like we do. That is a phenomenal organic. I hate that word. Organic means you're going to do Tai Chi and be a Democrat and believe in green. But organic way to control parasites is to use mama cows to vacuum the pastures and put the sheep out there, or versa versa. You with me on that? It's a phenomenal way to control parasites because they don't share parasites. Sorry, I got excited.
Anybody else? That answer you? Anything else before I go on with another one? Here we go, Rich.
Yeah, on high-risk calves, how true is the statement that the worm load on arrival on high-risk calves is much more predictive of having problems with the cattle than if you wipe out the worms, that you're going to be back as if you never had the worm load on arrival at all?
So when I was in graduate school, I actually did a feedlot trial looking at arrival worm loads in high-risk cattle. And what really blew me away is out of each lot that I tested, and I tested a representative from each pen, they were all over the board. I had some that had very low levels that had obviously came from, either they were previously dewormed somewhere right before they showed up. I had some that the test that they ran, we couldn't get an accurate count because there were too many. And it was very indicative of load coming in, that there was no predictive value from high-risk cattle from various varying areas around the United States. It was all over the board. And I've got a really cool graph I'd love to be able to show you, showing just that every group, it was all over the board, and then their response to treatment, response to a deworming agent, again, was all over the board. Some had really good response, some had absolutely horrible response, which would be below 90%, which would be considered resistant. So first, the lots of cattle that are coming in, their worm burdens all over the board. And there's no predictive value unless we actually look at them to really tell. So I wanted to throw that tidbit out.
Did that answer you? Okay. Anybody? Up back there.
When you guys receive a load of high-risk calves and you are going to deworm and mass treat those cattle, what's your opinion on giving the vaccine the first day or the 24 hours after getting those cattle in, or waiting maybe a week or two or whatever a guy wants to do after doing that to let that dewormer and antibiotic get to work?
So traditionally, we've always, and of course we like to booster, or I like to booster vaccines anyway. So, we're always going to give that 5-way in combination with several other things, but we're going to give one on arrival with the deworming, and then our goal is to revaccinate them over time anyway. Whether that's 10 days, whether that's 14 days. And if I was going to incorporate, and even if I was going to incorporate a delayed vaccination program, obviously we're still going to deworm on arrival. So that's not going to change. I still think that there's going to be a lot of value in vaccinating those animals on arrival. You're still going to catch a percentage of those and immunize those. And statistically, you need to booster them anyway to catch a majority of the herd for a booster vaccination. So my opinion, for what the vaccines cost and you're already running them through, immunize as many as you can.
We don't play soccer in Alabama, but if we did, there's this guy named Gretzky. He was a real good hockey player, something like that, on ice. And he said you will miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, and if the vaccines are worth it, then you take your shot. And multiple vaccinations are what we recommend, with a deworming associated with it.
Okay. Did that answer it? Okay. Okay. What about administration and protocols, things that you do or that you see done that you say, Man, this is being more hurtful than helpful.
I spend more time talking with guys shoot side about application than I do the protocol itself. And because in my opinion, what the hell's the point of talking about the protocol if we can't even apply it correctly? And I don't know, 90% of people don't apply it correctly, maybe. I would guess if I walk into any given processing barn on any day and watch what's going on, a topical dewormer is going to get sprayed in one spot. Cleanup 2 or any of those ectoparasites are going to get sprayed in one spot. Oral white wormers, I mean, you know, like Dan said, it's not a time to vet. Those are getting in and out. Wherever the squirt lands, that's that animal's fate, and then we move on. I'm sure there's statistics on what it is, but if you look at how you're supposed to apply those products, you know, you've got to span that animal from tail rump to withers at least. Anytime we're using products like cleanup, you know, we're shooting for about 30% on the head as well to account for face flies, and I think those are even more important than some of the others themselves. So, you know, it's kind of like using the generic Ivomec. If it doesn't work, why would you use it? Does it make you feel better? If we think we're paying that much more for a product like Sidectin or an oral white wormer, why would you just squirt it and let it be what it is and take a half a second or a second more to apply the product correctly? You know, you wouldn't take a $5 bill and just throw it on the ground. Why would you do that with your dewormer? So just take a little extra time. It's not going to make that much at the end.
One of the biggest things I've been working at is dosing by weight, okay? These products are dosed and they are formulated to be dosed by weight. How do we figure out what the proper volume to be able to treat a group of calves? It's really by knowing and understanding their weight. And that goes the same way with an antimicrobial, basically everything else other than our fixed concentrations, which are vaccines. Dosing by weight, when we underdose with especially parasiticides and things of that nature, that's where we can really run into resistance issues inadvertently. We could have been using them the right way and administering them correctly, just underdosing, okay? And ask yourselves this question. Do you dose cattle by the average of a group that comes in? And vast majority of people do, okay? And when it comes to deworming agents, if we're not dosing individual and we're readjusting our dosing gun, you might want to start considering going on the heavier end of what our lot comes from. And, I mean, from here at the stocker unit, we get a lot of groups of cattle that come in that are supposed to be like-sized, and we have a top-to-bottom weight spread of 300 pounds, okay? So we could be underdosing a large group of animals, big percentage of our animals, by a couple hundred pounds. That's one of the biggest reasons we can run into some resistance or misappropriate application, okay, where we're not getting the response from that investment we're trying to put in there. My other quick thing is what I see all the time out on the ranch, out in a lot of different operations, the old jug of some type of macrocytic lactone, whether it's Ivomec or whatever else, they leave it hung up, tied up on the side of the chute, and the whole hose is full of that product. These are temperature controlled type products we have to take care of. Sunlight will break them down. If they get too hot, they can start to break down. They won't work like we designed them to do. So proper quality control of both temperature, sunlight, protection, and then dosing by weight. So that's...
Both of y'all are really nice, nice looking young men, but ain't none of us ever missed a meal up here. You with me? So if you based on the average of weight of this room, okay, and dewormed all of us on average, we didn't get enough. And there's a couple people out there we might kill with a dewormer. So you're going to have to weigh them like you said. Number two, you have to get the dewormer placed properly. Like you said, put it on. I'm sure everybody in this room can hook a calf and put Panicure or Sonatic in them right. But my cousins can't, and most of the people in Lochapoka, Alabama ain't got a clue. And if the dewormer hits the ground, the only worm it kills is the one on the ground where it fell. Those are common sense things. You've got to do it by weight, and you've got to make sure it gets in the animal. Duh.
Okay.
Make sure on dual deworming, one thing I've seen too is guys that are using two products, they'll think because they're using two, they can dial back down on the oral, and I'll do 3/4 on the oral and 3/4 on the topical, and together that's 1.5 times the dose, right? No, that's not the way it works. You think you're saving pennies, and it's old school. We've all been around the old guy that used to take the disposable needles and sharpen them, you know, and then throw them in the microwave or something to try to sterilize them. And what you think you're saving on that is it's going to cause more harm than anything. Just don't worry about the pennies that you're saving. Use the product accordingly, and you'll get the return. The return will be there. Yeah.
Okay. You brought up resistance, and Dr. Pugh, you gave us some information about resistance in your part of the country, and how it's going to be a matter of coming here. I'm wondering, what do you two see so far, or do you have concerns about resistance and what you're seeing?
You know, I guess if there is resistance going on, and I'm sure there is statistically, I don't feel like we do see it. My biggest concern and my questions for the parasitologist would be, if we need to do something different, what is the easiest way for us to incorporate that and communicate that to our producers? Because if you can read the literature, you can start reading strategic deworming programs, and the deeper you go, the more confused you can get. And so I think if we're going to make the changes that we need to make, we need a little help on our end to help communicate that with these folks on how can we do that. What's the simplest way we can implement something that can still be effective without making it extremely complicated? Because at the end of the day, it's got to be an easy to use program to some extent.
All right, now we do have documented resistance in small ruminants, sheep and goat, horses. Basically all our other major species, we have documented resistance for most of our major parasiticides, even within Kansas. Have we been documenting resistance heavily in Kansas and beef cattle? No, we haven't, but I'll also be the first to admit that we haven't really been looking. Now, why that concerns me is, yeah, we can put the blinders on, but we're not getting new parasiticide chemicals that are coming down the pipeline. And I'm seriously doubtful that they're going to be coming anytime soon. And because of that, when we look at the rate of return, if there was an economist that did a great paper from Iowa State that looked at, pharmaceutical technologies and how much they mean for the cattle industry, and if we don't use them, what do we lose? Just for the stocker industry, we're losing about $21 a head by not having the ability to use those. For the entire industry, from cow-calf to feedlot, that'd be closer to $195 if we couldn't have the access to use a parasiticide. Now, does that mean we're all going to lose $200 due to resistance? Not necessarily, but that shows the value of what these products are, and I want to protect them into the future to make sure that we can use them long-term so we can maintain the usage and keep the ability to get those returns on investment. So that's, yeah.
Okay. Questions, thoughts?
On a cow herd where the condition of the cows are good, and you've been worming, would you skip a year on your worming protocol to try and slow down so they don't build up the resistance so fast? Where the cows are all in good shape, you don't have any poor cows, and your weaning weights are good, everything's good. Would you just skip a year on the cows?
So one way that, if I understood it was kind of hard to hear with the fans, but I think I got the gist of it. And the question was more or less that, do we skip a year to help, break the cycle of resistance? So there are certain animals within our cow-calf herd that really, they carry natural immunity against internal parasites. And other areas of the country have already implemented strategies like this where Mature cows just don't get dewormed. Once they hit about 3 years of age plus, they stop getting the internal deworming agent. They still get treatment for external parasites, of course, but that becomes, they're able to pick up other parasites that don't affect them to kind of manage those levels where they're not getting exposed to that chemical every year. So they're actually shedding good bugs back out into the pasture. Okay, so when the calf picks it up, it's a good bug because our parasiticide products still work against it. So that's one management tool that folks have used and to success in a lot of areas around the U.S.
Along those same lines, while you're on that topic, is and this is a little bit different, but this notion of refugia and extending my resistance before it becomes a problem by not, in other words, there's some that I'm not gonna treat. I want to leave clean so that I'm not killing everything and being left with the ones that are resistant. Any thoughts?
To me, you only treat animals that are sick that need to be treated because they're sick. You only deworm ones who need to be dewormed because they have internal parasites that are significant.
Can you all hear that? Because maybe.
Did I say it?
There you go. I think that's better.
Yeah, okay, my bad. So you deworm things that need to be dewormed, and you have to come up with parameters on how to determine that. And one way is body condition score. Another way is age. But you only deworm some that need to be dewormed. If you deworm everybody with the same dewormer every year or same class, I mean, you can switch from Dectomax, Ivomec to long range to Sidectin, but the same classes of dewormer every year, you will get worms that you can't kill. You know, I mean, that's just simple as that. And it's just like the problems we have with MRSA, MRSA in hospitals. We overuse antibiotics. There are no new ones coming down the pike, not for the foreseeable future. So we've got to figure out ways to manage away from that. So we deworm only the ones that we need to deworm. Skipping a year may be effective, but I wouldn't do that. I would only deworm. I would just not deworm everybody. Deworm animals that need to be dewormed, and it might be everybody on a farm. I don't know. Y'all know your farms. Sounds like some farms don't need no dewormer at all. But in Alabama, everything's got worms. The people got worms. Everything's got worms. The dogs got worms. Everything. So we can't do some of the same things, but we base body condition score. I ain't got worms. You know, there are some of y'all that probably could use a dewormer, but not me. And so I wouldn't be deworming me. Is that cool?
Yep. Any other thoughts?
So, and you may have said that, it's a question for you. Do you think that's still an applicable program on stocker calves coming from the southeast if we're feeding high-risk cattle? Do you think that's still something that could be implemented?
Yeah, you're saying that, and this was very telling. I've learned, as usual, I've learned more here than information I've imparted. I know that. I've learned more than information I've imparted. I've learned a lot. Listen to what you said, what he said, what Dr. Thompson said. And talking to people, I've learned a lot of things. And you said that you weren't sure what the program that the calves that you might run into had come from. So in that case, and if they come from Mississippi, which is lower than Alabama, that's lower, that's the only place we can look down on people from Alabama is Mississippi. If they come from Mississippi, they need to be dewormed. And if you don't have a chance to check them, when they get off the truck, they've been breathing diesel fumes, and mama don't love them no more, and all they know is their half-sibling and one of their cousins, and they're crying, I would deworm them. I'd still vaccinate them, but I'd come back and do it again, the vaccine again. I'd deworm them and assume that they got the bad worms. But if they come from North Dakota, I'm not sure I would make that assumption.
Okay. What about trap management, pasture management, things that you do?
So, other things that we can do to help combat some of these internal parasites. Well, just like flies and things like that, they live out of the manure, right? Yes, hot, desiccating, dry weather. How do we expose fecal pads to hot, drying out to destroy some of those larvae? I have known some operations that, particularly back home, down in the Missouri River Valley, they'll go out and harrow pastures. And they were doing it not to deal with parasite loads, but they were actually doing it to break up manure patties so they'd kind of dissipate and get out of the way so grass would grow back, so they didn't have all these big piles of missing areas. And lo and behold, they went to go look at it, and they were majorly impacting there was no transfer of pasture parasites, or very little, because they were actually drying them and desiccating them during the summer months. July, August, they were breaking fecal pads and actually disrupting how many environmental larvae were actually there. So, the other thing is what we put them on. Dr. Pugh had mentioned several times about permanent pastures versus non. Wheat pasture. Between wheat pasture, grazing stalks, we do a lot of different things when we background. If that ground has been worked or disrupted, we're not concerned about that area holding and transferring season to season internal parasites. So, and we utilize a lot of those cover crops, wheat pasture, residue, especially from corn and sorghum. So those are very low risk when it comes to internal parasite pickup and transfer.
Okay. Anything? Y'all are letting me ask all the questions. Back to this, I'm going to ask it this way, and I guess I get at it from the resistance side of it, where you say that you don't think we're really, while it's documented, maybe not seen a lot of resistance, et cetera. So another way of asking that is, the products that are available today, are they effective? And that's a loaded, open-ended question, I understand.
Yeah, all the products we have value, and I tend not to use generic pour-on ivermectin, but it very well may be the Mabajama yellow hammer on certain farms. I don't know, but where we live, it seems to have less efficacy. But all of the products have value and work real good. But all worms ain't the same, and so if I see stocker cattle, my first thought are of the Haemonchus species genus and the Cupira genus, and I'm going to pick a white worm or a sidectin for those. In adult cows, I tend to think of, if they've been managed properly, Ostratagia. Now, you see the handouts have Oesophagostomy and Trichostrongylus and all those listed because they're window dressing. They look good, but they don't cause hardly no trouble. The big ticket items is who I want to kill dead. I used to tell veterinary students, they say, what's the best book to read? What's the best book to read? And I said, Bible. And they said, well, other than that, you can't talk about that. So I'd say this book by Machiavelli. And he wrote a book called The Prince. And you want to fight disease, you do what he said. You burn the crops, you poison the whales, you kill the livestock, you kill everybody. You do that with the disease. And so you have to find the parasite that will kill them all. There ain't no dewormer that'll kill them all. You have to figure out the parasites that are the problem, and you aim at them. In adult cows, I think of Ostratagia. In calves under 2 years of age, I think of Haemonchus and Cupira. But all the dewormers presently on the market have value. If it's 122 degrees outside and I have an injectable form of levamisole and I'm working through the chute and everybody's got a hot shot, one of them little dogs with a red bandana around it bites your ankles, I'm not going to use levamisole injectable. You with me?
Yep. Okay. I'm giving you all the opportunities. Okay. Let me ask one thing that I was curious about, and you addressed it a little bit, and I understand your fears. What do you know about this FDA new labeling going on? Anything? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a technicality of what it's on the label of something that we've known for years already, and I think that comes out as a warning that says if you use this inappropriately and nondescriptly, we will run into resistance issues. The only problem is they wrote that on there about 30 years too late. So not soon after ivermectin hit the market, they were starting to document resistance from it, similar to penicillin on the human side. So even though it's a new label change that has been implemented by the FDA, it doesn't tell us anything new. But it does, I think, bring to the limelight that maybe we should reassess how we use these things to ensure that we're using them appropriately to make sure that they're going to be usable long term. So I think it just brings that question to the table.
Okay. Very good.
They say you can keep your mouth shut and be thought dumb, and to open it and confirm the suspicion. It was probably explained earlier, but what are white wormers?
Oh, okay, white wormers. I thought you was just talking simply about me keeping my mouth shut. I was going to agree with you. My wife's sitting back there. She'd agree with you too. See, the only reason I can talk much is I love her. For 45 years, I've loved her. 50 years we dated and such. But if I get away from her, I can talk a little bit. But white wormers are the benzimidazole class. And that would be Safeguard, which is the same thing as Panacur. That would be Anthalcide in horses, which is oxyfobendazole. Panacur is fenbendazole. That would be albendazole or Pfizer. P silent. It's called Zoetis now. I say it that way because it pisses him off. It's called Valbasin, and then there's Synatic, which is oxybendazole, and all of those are in the same family, and those are white by color usually, and so we call them white wormers. But that's a great question, actually. It really is. But I still thought you'd talk about me keeping my mouth shut, because I confirmed the fact I'm stupid usually.
Anything else? I'll pose one last question to you all. As you think about parasite control programs, what you're doing, how you work with clients, that kind of thing, is there anything that we haven't talked about during this panel discussion that you say, man, this is a big thing about parasite control, and Dummy up here hadn't asked a question about it?
Management of them, and they know more about this than I do because they're real veterinarians. But management is the best way to control everything, disease and everything, but parasites. Diet is so, not just pasture management, but diet is intimately associated with parasite control. Increased protein, decreased parasite. Look, there's a whole bunch of people. I thought all the hippies were freeze-dried or doing hard time, but they're coming back with a vengeance. They don't know Jimi Hendrix is dead. He died in 1970, and Peter, Paul, and Mary to them are going to get back together. But Mary Travers is dead too, so they're not coming back. But there's a bunch of people who like organic, whatever that means, organic. And they like things that ain't been dewormed and ain't been vaccinated, such as that. And that's the future too, because that's green, all the hippies. So if you can do management protocols and minimize the need of deworming, that's a better way. I'm going to have to deworm some, but I can feed properly, graze them properly, make sure my trace minerals, which everybody talks about, which is nowhere near as important as water and energy and protein, are normal. And that's what they do for a living. That's herd health. And that's a great way to control the future of parasites and make new inroads into other kind of beef, green label stuff, for the hippies.
Anything to add? Okay.
I actually have a question for Dr. Pugh. So let's say someone wanted to utilize a pasture grazing program or rotational program to help eliminate parasites and still be successful. In general, big picture terms, how would you recommend they do that? And what would be your biggest concerns about someone incorporating that?
How are we doing on time?
Well, if it's in the southeast and we run 1 cow per 2 acres, okay, It's going to be different than if it's South Texas where you might run one cow and 100 acres, or 150 acres. But where I live, you can do intensive grazing programs, but we're going to have to move them very quickly. I'd prefer to move them once the grass gets below 3 inches, okay, not a carpet, but 3 inches, because most parasites won't crawl up the grass any higher than that. And we'll also decrease flies by doing that if they're pretty tight, because flies have to have a static fecal pat to really pupate, and if cows step all in it, then you're going to decrease the ability of flies to control. Then move them, and I'd like a dry lot. This don't sound good to everybody, but a dry lot between them, because that's a great way to break a parasite program. A lot of the green label people that I still work for, okay, and they're out there. We have to do things like that, where we intensive graze, move them when the grass gets about 3 inches, maybe 4 inches tall, and move them to another pasture. And you'd like to say things like, well, I want them off this original pasture for 3 months. Well, you're going to have them back on there when you have to have them back on there, because you ain't got no grass to feed, But if I add some feed to the diet, not just grass, but feed corn silage, just high protein, we're going to decrease parasitism too. I didn't answer your question because I don't live in Kansas. I live in Alabama, okay? And in Alabama, the word Saban and Satan are very similar, okay?
Last call. Let's thank these gentlemen for their insights.